Hello, everybody. Chaweon here from Witches and Wine. And I'm so excited to be talking today with Rachel of Aeolian Heart. And guys, we're both kind of fangirling right now because we both love Lana Del Rey. And what can I say? Like, I even put on the little tears that Lana put on for Young and Beautiful. I just did a makeup tutorial less than 24 hours ago. I was basically inside. I was like screaming, like, yes, I have an excuse to try to channel Lana. Because let's keep it real. Lana is just like our girl, right? Like, there hasn't been an artist in, I would say, at least a couple of years where I was just like, I feel her. Like, she's a little bit polarizing. A lot of people have things to say about the type of energy she brings and whether or not she may or may not be a good role model. I mean, but the thing is, at the end of the day, there's something about her that is so relatable for so many people, men and women included. So she is an incredible person to sort of analyze in terms of her astrological chart. She seems complicated. She is. Her chart is going to be so fun to look at in terms of the planets. We're going to see where her artistry comes from, and it's so laid out in that chart. And that's the beauty of astrological charts. So, guys, comment if you have any questions and any comments about the chart while we're going through it. And Rachel, it's so exciting to talk to you again.
Yeah, totally. Nice to see you again, Chaweon. Thank you for coming up with this great idea. I'm super inspired by Lana Del Rey, and I love that she's provocative and controversial, because that's what artists should be. I think that we live in a very like flat, two-dimensional time for culture and art in a lot of ways. And thank God we have someone like her who brings like three-dimensional sensuality, beauty, sexuality, darkness, splendor, pride, joy. She's gorgeous. So I love Lana Del Rey. And I think I love her because I love all of the music that she is evoking. I love all of the style and the music and the history that she's evoking. So I get where she's coming from. I totally appreciate the fact that she is basically channeling archetypes that we absolutely need to be channeled. Art is healing for all of us, and so I appreciate the fact that she dives into some very dark places, to be sure, but she does so with a loving heart. And that's what I've really come back with by studying her chart. So I wanted to introduce Lana Del Rey's chart, or actually Elizabeth Grant's chart, but I'm going to refer to her as Lana Del Rey for reasons that I will explain more later. And just out of respect to, the character that she's created, the persona that she has used to interact with the public, we're going to call her Lana Del Rey, but this is actually, a real woman, Elizabeth Grant's chart. So one moment while I get it up on screen for everybody to look at.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we talked about was that she's sort of a late Gemini. We did a live stream about Kanye West, who's also a Gemini. But what does it mean that she's more of a late Gemini? Or I think you used the term solstice baby.
Oh, well, she is a solstice baby, yeah. I mean, it's actually amazing because if she had been born 1 hour later, she would have been a Cancer. So she was born in the last hour of Gemini. And a lot of people call that a cusp. But there's really no such thing as a cusp. You either are a Gemini or you're not. There are strict, precise mathematical rules about all of this. And so she was born in the last hour of Gemini. And what I interpret that as in many ways for the last degree of any sign, it's like this. But the last degree of a sign right before the solstice, this is very significant. She was born at a time where the full culmination of Geminian energy, the full culmination of that sign's story had come to fruition. Almost like a rare flower that finally blooms, and only for like a minute before it transforms into a completely different thing. So it's a very exotic, very rare nexus point between signs, between worlds, between seasons. And it's interesting because I know another great artist who was born at exactly this time, many years before Lana, but I'm going to his birthday today. And he too is just an immensely powerful artist who seems to me to create a very rare ability to have a vast knowledge, a vast library of wisdom that he's drawing from. And it's all laid out for him the way that it seems to be for Lana Del Rey as a singer. The amount...
Would you say that Lana Del Rey being born at this cusp, or close to becoming a Cancer and having all these energies of Gemini just culminating in her,
yeah.
Would you say that she was kind of born to be a star?
Well, not necessarily born to be a star just because of Gemini. Not necessarily does the last degree of Gemini indicate stardom. She has a very pronounced placement of Jupiter in the 10th house of worldly success. That's one indication that somebody's meant to become a public figure, meant to become influential in the world at large. But I think the first thing that tells me that this is going to be an artist, whether or not she becomes famous, is the fact that her rising in Taurus is conjunct the planet Venus. So for those that don't know, the rising sign, it represents somebody's energetic skin, sort of the outer energy, the vibe that they have, as well as the worldview that they have in many ways. A lens of perception that they see the world through, and also what people see them through. And so the rising sign in her chart is Taurus, which is a very embodied, sensual, pleasure-driven, pleasure garden building sign. And its ruler is Venus. And she has Venus in her rulership right there on the ascendant, exactly on the angle of the ascendant. So her ascendant is at 13 degrees right there. And we have Venus right on top. So for a celebrity, the rising sign is the image that we all recognize them through. And when we have a planet right on top of the rising sign, right on top of the ascendant, we actually see somebody who embodies that archetypal energy. And so that means that this woman was born to be an embodiment of Venus as an archetype. She is an archetype of Venus. And Venus is absolutely associated with art, creation of beauty, attraction, the experience of luxury, sensuality. Specifically, Venus in Taurus is the most embodied, luxurious, and sensual expression of Venusian energy. And so you can see just in her obvious beauty and in her grace and her gentleness, this Venus archetype so beautifully expressed. Walt Whitman, actually, someone who Lana Del Rey has referenced in her lyrics, I Sing the Body Electric, Walt Whitman, he had Venus rising in Taurus as well, just like her. So what seems to be apparent in both those figures is a rich appreciation of the beauty that's present in life and in nature. She was born to be an artist because of Venus right on the ascendant. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I love the comments that you guys are putting up so far. So Avalon says that she is channeling archetypes we absolutely need. Word, absolutely. Zara, you're saying, I love that archetype of Venus. That's totally her. So you guys definitely see it too. Anyone who knows nothing about astrology, has never seen her chart, can still feel all the archetypes that she's channeling in such a pure and beautiful way. And without a doubt, a lot of people say Lana is a goddess. There you go, Venus.
Venus in Taurus, Venus in her rulership, absolutely. She changes her vibe and her feel and her look a lot, but unlike Madonna, she's always got this underlying presence that feels the same. This Venus and Taurus presence. It's always the same. There's something very familiar about her, no matter what her hair color is or what style it's in. So she's not just changing shape constantly the way that some other pop stars have, artfully too. Her art is to show how many beautiful mannerisms Venus can embody. The other really interesting thing for anyone who knows a little bit about the medical astrology, the language of medical astrology, each sign in the zodiac is associated with a different body part and a different physical body functioning. Taurus is actually associated with the throat. And so to have Venus in Taurus right on the ascendant, it indicates that she might have a very rich, deep, sweet voice. Again, the soul of Venus comes through the throat. And this can be interpreted as one of the reasons why she's a great singer. It's one of the reasons. It's not just coming from the throat. It's not just the Taurus, but it certainly helps. It certainly has graced her with an extra beautiful voice. So, yeah.
So we talked about how a lot of rappers are Geminis. They're very dexterous with their words. So Lana, she's a Gemini, and she also has on top of that Taurus. So she's got the voice thing going on as well. So the quality, the timbre of her voice, plus the ability to be dexterous with her words, combining those together with the Jupiter in her 10th house. What would you say if somebody came to you with a chart like that?
Well, if they weren't already on their way to or positioned in a place of influence in the world, I would tell them to get ready to experience a journey towards some kind of platform where they would be made public. They would be made an instrument of influence in this world. It's actually a really big responsibility, you know. Her Gemini sun, it makes her brilliant, you know. Her the sign of Gemini is the place where mental energies are scattered to the wind, and they bring back this great pollination of ideas. And they take great pride in voraciously consuming anything and everything that gifts them with new knowledge. And they are born to understand life as a vast array of possibility. And so that most Geminis have a diverse amount of interests, talents, curiosities, and skills, and they can really be and feel like a million different people from one day to the next, like that 90s song. So it can be difficult for them to focus. But what's interesting about right when she was born, it's the time in Gemini where focus has to be made. Many, many things fall away so that one thing that was brought back, one seed, one idea can be made beautiful, can be made to flourish. So Geminis, especially right at the end of the sign, tend to be very self-aware and also conflicted, always stretched across polarities, seeing both sides of every story and feeling for both sides of every situation. So you can really hear this in her lyrics, being able to sing from the point of view of anybody or any woman anyway. And also she explores a lot of stark duality in her lyrics as well. Internal contradictions. We were born to die. Just think about that for a minute. Like, you're born to die. That is a Geminian statement if I've ever heard one. And the thing is that to be born right at the solstice indicates that she'd understand the need to make a great sacrifice in order to bring something that she loves into fruition. So she may be good at a million different things, but she's made a great sacrifice so that she can become an artist. And she decided that this was worth everything. And so when the solstice actually happens, the sun is at its apex in the sky and it moves into Cancer and it begins to descend. She was born right before that, when the sacrifice has to be made. And so someone born at this time of year, I would tell them, and I certainly can see in her life, that she has learned to sacrifice her own light for something that's larger than herself, or something that she feels is more important than her individual needs. I'd say to be any kind of famous artist is a really big sacrifice, because though fame is something that is supported by her natal chart in many ways, she's also very sensitive and vulnerable to the ill effects of being in the public eye. So like the sun only out in order to bring joy to other people, to warm people's hearts, touch their souls. So she's probably someone who really resonates with stories of martyrs because there is this sort of archetypal sacrifice that she's made in her life for her art.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Zara, is it Zara or Zara? I'm so sorry. Brings up a very interesting point. Is that Neptune opposite her sun?
Yeah, very good, Zara. That's what makes her the great artist that she is, in my opinion. You know, Neptune, Neptune puts the mist in mysticism, I should say. It's a planet that is filled with shimmering light. It's this shimmering, glimmering light that leads to transcendence and also delusion in equal measure. It's the light from the stars, and it also creates the experience of glamour. The idea of glamour is Neptunian. Like, it's a shimmering light that sort of envelops somebody and makes them into an ethereal, archetypal creature rather than an actual person. Glamour is when we see somebody who is a real person like you or I, uplifted into something mythic, legendary, archetypal. So to have your sun oppose Neptune is saying that this is a woman who is going to glamorize herself. The sun represents the self. That opposition with Neptune, it makes it almost an absolute necessity for her to live some kind of ideal life, to become something mythic, and to touch the divine in some way in their life through this journey of acting out archetypes, acting out mythology. Neptune, when it touches the sun, it does glamorize the experience of the self, which can be obviously really wonderful, but it leads to a yearning for real life to be more like ideal life. There is a sense of like loss and dissatisfaction and sometimes a lot of confusion about the self because of the fact that ideals and archetypes and myths don't always portray life as it is in the mundane world. So somebody with Sun Neptune contacts, and especially in opposition, which is very intense, can feel a lot of dissatisfaction with mundane reality. Therefore, it would drive them into fantasy worlds to live there. An artist, in other words. So to be involved in artistic expression is not only good for her, it's probably what she needs in order to cope. Honestly, they need to be able to objectify their own psyche and explore the reality of a world that is mythic, that's fantasy, an escape from the harshness of what we call mundane reality. It's a rare gift that she has to be able to get inside of a character and let the audience get inside of that character as well. And she conveys that character's complexities with such accuracy and insight that everyone feels just completely swept away and enchanted by it. But the price of Sun-Neptune contacts is to feel a great deal of dissatisfaction and loss when forced to be in mundane reality. So she has to be an artist.
Well, her art seems to also embody that. I mean, when I think of Lana, I think of videos that have that nice, hazy, almost Vaseline over the lens feel. There's a retro feeling that's also modern. When I think of modernity and just being on top of things, very much like Gemini, but then you've got that mist of Neptune on top of that. That's one of the things I definitely think about. Also, when I think about Lana, it is her disdain almost for just regular life. I mean, in Born to Die, the entire video and the whole message is, yeah, you know, let's just live hard, you know, like just regular life. Fuck that, you know, like I want to be extra, but not just like extra in a basic way. I want to just live to this almost fantastical movie, cinematic. Her music has been described as lush and cinematic. Definitely not something that you can do in somebody's garage. You know, you can't just like put together her songs and her videos or anything like that just on a shoestring. It's just very, I would almost say when a nuclear bomb drops and then all of a sudden the vegetation afterwards, it grows even faster than it would grow normally. It has that sort of feeling.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. She, you know, there are fantasy nerds in this world that spend like half their life living in Middle Earth from Tolkien. There are fantasy nerds that get lost in like video game worlds. And then there's Lana Del Rey. She's like, she lives in the American dream, something that has been constructed like over the last 60 years, 70 years. This archetypal and mythic realm that's all about the American dream, which includes romantic ideology, which includes that idea of freedom, beauty, dreams, and expansion. There's nothing real about it. It is 100% a Neptunian fantasy realm. But it's so beautiful. And that's what we admire about it, about her art, is that she has really highlighted the beauty that's there. And she doesn't really care what people think. They're not, if they are criticizing her art from a perspective that doesn't understand where she's living or what she's embodying, it doesn't seem to bother her or affect her at all. You know, she's in that world, she's happy there. That's what she's working with. So, you know.
That's so interesting that you bring up American Dream. Because, yeah, when I think about it, she's kind of embodying that. I know when JFK, he became president, people called that entire time like Camelot.
Yeah.
So she seems to definitely have a certain sort of, I don't know, it's almost like Kennedy-esque. Maybe I'm just thinking of like that one video she did, National Anthem. But what in her chart would indicate that she's all about that? Because she could have chosen so many different sorts of time periods and cultures, but she seems so American.
Yeah. Well, that's actually very pronounced in her part. She has her moon in the sign of Leo in the 4th house. So let me describe the 4th house for people. The 4th house in the natal chart represents our connection to our home, our family, our ancestors, and our land. The roots that we have. And to have the moon in the 4th house of home and ancestral lineage means that her emotional needs and her deepest childhood imprints are fed and nourished and nurtured by the land that she comes from, by the ancestors that she calls her own. And obviously that includes her literal family, but it is something that gets expanded beyond just your family to also include the people that you feel are your countrymen. And so there's a lot of a nationalistic streak with people that have moon in the 4th house. And obviously in her case, it's not Republican politics. It's the fact that she loves Walt Whitman. It's the fact that she is constantly peppering her lyrics with the great poetry of the American tradition. You can feel, you know, she says like, you know, Elvis is my father, Marilyn's my mother. That's the 4th house moon, just feeling fed and nourished by where she comes from and the history that's behind where she comes from. So it's not a minor note in her life that she's American. It's a huge deal. It's where she draws the most pride from. Now, the moon in Leo. Leo is a fire sign. It's associated with drama. It's associated with the idea of performance. And the moon in Leo is most like a child, actually. It's very sweet and expressive, the way that children are. But they need a lot of positive attention and encouragement, like children. Because Moon and Leo people are very emotionally receptive to the attention they receive. And so this is a huge vulnerability in Lana's chart. It makes her almost like absolutely need to express herself, but she's actually very sensitive to how she is seen in the public eye. Right? You come from, your home, your family, your roots, and it's private. And so to have public attention turned on this very private area of her psyche is very painful, for sure. As a result, she has grown this protective mask, this persona, which is what Moon and Leos do to defend themselves against this absolutely agonizing vulnerability. So Elizabeth Grant created Lana Del Rey, an artfully constructed mask which protects her tenderest and most vulnerable self from that glare of the public eye. Now, that's a very beautiful thing, and I think it's really, really smart. I took a cue from her and many other people. Writers, for example, started writing under a name that was not my own because I like that protective quality that it gives you. The downside of creating a persona to communicate with the world through is that you can become overly dependent on the emotional security that Lana Del Rey mask provides. And that can become too much of a fixation, and it can become very difficult for an artist to learn to distinguish that public persona, that mask, from the deeper levels of being at a certain time. And I really think she addresses that in the song 13 Beaches off of Lust for Life. She says, she starts it out with like, I don't belong in the world. Something separates me from other people. And then the lyrics go on to say, she says, it hurts to love you, but I still love you. It's just the way I feel. I'd be lying if I kept hiding the fact that I can't deal and that I've been dying for something real. Now, it sounds like she's singing to a man, and she could be, but I really have always felt like she's actually singing to her persona. She's singing to Lana Del Rey. She loves her. And there's nothing that can be done about that. But she is unable to deal with the fact that she's dying for something real. Because it is artificial, you know? It's the quality of the Moon in Leo that has a dark side, even though it's the only way for the Moon in Leo to express themselves. So that's, you know, that's her crisis as an artist.
You know, I did read an interview that she did say, you know, I thought that once I became famous, I would find my crew. I would find friends. I would find kindred spirits. And she was like, I still haven't found them yet. And that, I know, right? And that longing to find kindred spirits, to find like-minded people, that does seem very much to permeate everything that she does. It's sort of being able to delve and honestly express things that we all feel, that dark, isolated, heavy feeling. Somehow she's able to do it without people screaming and running away from her. A lot of people, I think, are emotionally intense, but the way that she does it seems to be palatable. Is there anything on her chart that shows that she can do that?
It's that Venus right there. It's like a spoonful of sugar to help all the medicine go down. She can't help but make everything beautiful. So she can talk about anything. She can talk about rape, murder, prostitution, drug addiction, suicidal depression, grief, and it comes through as beautiful. And the intention in her work always seems to, well, she has a Plutonian vibe, which means that she's in touch with the deepest and darkest recesses of the human psyche. But Pluto is not just dark for the sake of being dark. It's not just goth, a lifestyle choice to resonate with death and blackness. It's nothing like that. Pluto is the transformative energy in the universe. It's an aeonic, fluctuating energy that actually transforms death into new life. But first, death has to be faced. You know, you have to confront the darkness in order to transmute it into light. Now she does that. She's a very Plutonian artist in that regard, because when she writes about and sings about and embodies these darker characters, these darker stories, she's transmuting them into light. She's not doing it just to bring shadows into everybody's world. She's actually doing some really, really important healing work. And what's interesting is that this same moon that we were talking about in Leo, it's in a square with Pluto. And so that makes that really vulnerable, sensitive, expressive moon in the fourth house intimately connected in a hard aspect to Pluto in Scorpio. I'm also a Pluto in Scorpio, Saturn in Scorpio like her. And so it is a very intense connection to have that sensitive, emotional moon tied to Pluto's work. I would say that when somebody has a moon-Pluto aspect, especially a hard one, they act as a sponge for all of the negative, buried, and unexpressed feelings that float around in the ether. This is like far beyond her own family issues, although someone with a moon squared Pluto in the fourth house she'd be somebody that knew every terrible secret in her family and was sort of expected to either keep quiet or break the family curse. But as a public persona, as an artist that we all connect to, she's doing that for the collective. And so she feels darkness that she's never lived out. She feels pain, suffering, sorrow that she has never actually had to experience in her waking life. But that's what she does. She submerges herself in that pain and suffering. She's very intimate with people on a psychic level this way. And she transmutes it. Now, the dark side of this, of course, is that when you have a moon-Pluto contact, because you're able to penetrate so much of the emotional energy in the world, you feel like such an intimate connection with other people at a psychic level. I'll just use that word for lack of a better term, a psychic level. That she herself would fear a lot of invasion from others, almost to a paranoid degree, because she would be afraid that other people could feel her as deeply as she can feel them. So people with moon-Pluto contacts tend to keep a really big wall up, if at all possible. She likes to keep her feelings and the details of her private and domestic life well hidden from public view. Even though she's famous, we don't know nearly as much about her private life as we do about many celebrities, including Kanye West, who we just talked about, whose life just kind of splatter painted all over the world, over the eyeballs of the world. Lana Del Rey has a mask. She has a very demure way of presenting her private life in that she doesn't really. We don't know that much about what's actually going on with her. Just little bits here and there. She has a very intense emotional nature, very intense, very intimate. And it's not always fun. It's not always tranquil, but it's one of the reasons why her vocal range and her artistic repertoire is so intense and vivid and multicolored and multidimensional. Because she really does understand the highest highs and the lowest lows. So, Plutonian depths, ultraviolence, hit me and it felt like a kiss. That is her moon squared Pluto. She's trying to help other people. She's trying to help the collective understand, first meditate on the darkness of that statement, and then understand how true that is for so many people. And it's not always literally about relationships either. You can have a relationship with a drug like that.
She did mention that her first relationship was actually with alcohol. So I think she went to rehab when she was a teenager for alcohol.
Yeah, I've
And
heard 14, I think, was the rule.
yeah. So oftentimes when she's writing about what we think, I mean, could seventh house, which is usually the house of marriage and one-on-one relationships, whether it's business or any sort of collabs one-on-one, could that also be a house of your one-on-one relationship with inanimate objects, or is it just people?
The seventh house really is about people. It really is. It's interpersonal relationships. So, you know, we can actually look at her seventh house if you'd like. Her seventh house is where Scorpio lies with Saturn and Pluto. So,
That's
I mean,
intense.
it is intense. It's very intense. We'll just start with Saturn. She's got Saturn retrograde in Scorpio. Also have the house though, so it's not focused in the same area, but I do understand a little bit about what she's gone through. Saturn in people's natal charts represents where there is intense fear, a feeling of inadequacy, and a feeling of hunger or lack, up to a time in life where you have mastered and disciplined yourself enough to overcome that pain, essentially. Saturn does not favor young people. Saturn is for older, mature, wise people who have done the work to master whatever issue it is that they have. Lana and I have gone through our first Saturn return, which is helpful, but we are by no means wise. So to have Saturn in the seventh house, it says that one of the things that she fears most deeply, or perhaps the most fearful thing for her, is that experience of interpersonal relationships, becoming deeply involved with others, dreading and expecting to be hurt, craving intimacy and vulnerability with another person more than anything, but feeling inadequate to actually be there for commitment. And it's a house that asks a person, with Saturn there especially, and Pluto as well, to ask many deep questions of themselves about their ability to commit to somebody. And they grow wiser about relationships and find they are ready for commitment later in life. Saturn in the seventh house does not favor a young marriage. It does not favor a young marriage, but it does eventually mature into somebody who takes commitment very, very seriously. She will actually be able to mature into somebody who has overcome this fear. But the Pluto placement there makes this doubly difficult because Pluto in the seventh house makes her just so, it makes her easy to fall in love with, and it makes her so prone to fall in love. Like, there's this mystery that Pluto brings. And in the seventh house, that mystery is seen in her eyes when other people are in her presence. So in her interpersonal relationships, there's this, you know, attractive, magnetic pull that she has over other people. So obviously, it's one of the reasons why she's famous, but this makes people want to be with her in a very intimate way. And it makes her easily drawn into the enchantment of intimacy. But it also is difficult to actually attract people who do not embody Plutonian archetypes, especially when you're young. So Plutonian archetypes are the victimizer, the stalker, the drug addict, the narcissist. There's almost this like necessity for her to be attracted to these very, very unhealthy types. This would be men, obviously, in sexual relationships. It could also be friends. It could also be friends and people that she does business with. There's an attraction that she has to the Plutonian archetype. Now, Pluto has a transmutational power. And you are supposed to, in your life, go through the darkness, wade through the destructive side of Pluto. Those archetypes are described as the destructive Plutonian archetypes. and come out the other side reborn and renewed, and ready to actually become a healer, to be healed and to be a healer. So on the journey of someone with Pluto in the 7th house, eventually they have to learn to depend upon the goodness of another person and just trust that. It's very hard. You have to actually trust, have complete faith that somebody else is there for you, that they meant what they said, that they do actually love you. And what's nice is that when this healing and integration is processed and it's actually done, she'll understand, and anyone with Pluto in the 7th house, especially in Scorpio, will understand that the person that is truly your lover in this world does not alter their feelings for you, even when life gets rough. That love is not love that alters when the alteration finds, as Shakespeare said. That's their great lesson. It's so hard for them to trust that somebody would love them even if something happened, even if conditions changed, even if something went down. Because Plutonian archetypes, the destructive ones, don't. Narcissists, drug addicts, nihilists, they bail when life gets hard. They bail. Plutonian 7th house stories are supposed to end with knowledge of who it is in this world that can actually be trusted. So there is a deep amount of healing and transformation that's meant to happen in her life in the 7th house. But in her youth, it's really hard. And what's great about her is that she's turned it into her art. She sings about all of these men. It's really beautiful. So I think she's aiding the transmutational process in probably the most profound way that I can think of. I cannot imagine prescribing anything more effective and more beautiful than turning this into art. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, her chart, there's so many houses that are just jam-packed, or it just seems very busy, like in certain areas. But Teresa brings up a very good point. She says, what about houses that don't have planets in them? Are they lacking or just not a focus?
No, they're not. I mean, the whole natal chart, just for everybody, this whole natal chart is you. We have all 12 signs within us. The signs that have planets in them are like highlighted. They're highlighted. They're emphasized. But the empty houses, actually, they're like empty cups waiting to be filled. And an empty cup in the mind or in the heart or in the psyche, if you will, is actually one that does a lot of dreaming and imagining, has a lot of thirst and hunger to know more. So it tends to be places that are empty in our charts are places where we are drawn in. It's a mystery that we want to learn more about. So you can see that, you know, when you have an empty house, you find other people who have that emphasis in their chart to teach you about what's there, to help you fill that empty cup. And there are also transits. So the planets that are moving around us right now, they end up filling those empty houses at different times of the year. So the empty houses are always being influenced in some way, either by that like just imagination or that dream of what should be there, what could be there, to the fact that transits actually come and fill those houses with light and fill those houses with stories. So nobody has blank spaces in their chart. That's not a place where you're lacking. I'd say it's a place where you have a lot more creative freedom, actually. It's like being given an apartment that's not furnished. And you're like, I could do whatever I want. Yes, you know? There's a lot of freedom with an empty house versus a house that has a lot of planets. It's kind of, I'm not saying you're fated to anything. You have a lot of choice about what you do with this energy, but this is the hand that you've been given. You must learn to work with it. It's a lot like your genetics, you know? This is the hand you've been given. Learn to work with it. You can dye your hair any color. You can wear higher shoes if you want to be taller, but the fact is that you have to work with your height, your hair color, your eye color, your skin color, etc. So that's what it's like to have a lot of planets in your house. You're like, this is what you have to work with. Now figure it out.
So speaking of the houses, Avalon Rex also brings up a very good question, which is if you have, I know that there's a Pluto and Scorpio generation. If you have Pluto and Scorpio, but it's not in the seventh house, maybe it's in the first house, sixth house, whichever house it is, does the same sort of Plutonian lessons, do they still apply to all the houses?
Absolutely, 100%. I will send out, I wrote an ebook with Carolyn Elliott on the Pluto and Scorpio generation. And I'll send it out to everybody that showed up to this webinar, because it's kind of exhaustive and very detailed, and I cannot go through each one of the houses. But yeah, Pluto and Scorpio in each one of the houses has its own specific Plutonian lesson. But I'd say like the broad theme of Pluto and Scorpio, just all of us, everyone born in that window, we are here to transmute energy that had long been repressed and lost, you know. I was born during like the AIDS epidemic and the crack epidemic, and these things are significant because Pluto was in Scorpio. And that's the kind of eruption that happened with, you know, sex and altered states of consciousness. And Pluto and Scorpio people are here to process all of that death and decay and bring light to these areas again. So reclaim sexual energy, magical energy, reclaim the dark parts of the psyche and make them healthy. Not let them wallow in disease, make them healthy. Like allow people to speak about things that we were not allowed to speak about before, to practice things that were hidden before. So yeah, the Pluto Scorpio generation is the one that's blasting this shining light on the occult and all things that used to be considered hidden and are no longer. You know, I'm talking openly about astrology in front of the world, and I suffer no persecution whatsoever. So yeah.
I mean, that's really fun, actually. And the fact that Lana is able to capitalize on all those dark urges and be able to serve as an archetype and a spokesperson for, I think, a huge segment of the Pluto and Scorpio generation. I think that's very telling.
Oh yeah, I mean, she's a leader. She's a leader. She has a really, really good chart to become somebody who influences their generation, you know, a generational influencer. She's not the only one, but she's significant, and she's made some intelligent choices, and she also has, clearly she has good people working with her to elevate her to a certain level where she can reach a large number of people. And in many ways, I think without being overexploited, she is maybe hounded and chased a little more than she's comfortable with, for sure. But she by no means has the life that Kanye West does, that we were describing a couple weeks ago. She's not that overexposed. She's much more protected, so that she can do this work. It's really important work. Her Jupiter retrograde in Aquarius is the ticket to fame. So whenever people have pronounced 10th houses, it says they're supposed to do something in the world. That even if she would have liked to have stayed in a very like quiet, private, secluded, subjective little world, maybe just a close-knit group of fellow bohemians, that might have actually been really pleasing for her. But the Jupiter in the 10th house says, no, the only way that you're going to grow and find wisdom in this world is to do something in the world, to be on a platform that reaches lots of people, to become some kind of teacher, actually. So she has Jupiter retrograde, and that means that that experience of Jupiter is even more internalized. It's not so much about fame, it's about meaning. She's on a quest for meaning in this world, and in order to find that meaning, she has found that she must be a public persona.
So is that what Jupiter retrograde means? Like it's still an outward expression, but there's also a more complicated, like I know a lot of people have retrograde Jupiter in their charts. So does that mean that it's not just the out expansion, but it's also an inward expansion?
Yeah, it's an inward expansion far before it ever becomes anything obvious on the outside. People with retrograde planets of any kind, I always teach it this way. This is my favorite metaphor. It's like a seed that germinates beneath the soil, and instead of shooting straight up for the sun, it actually begins growing a network of roots deeper and deeper into the earth to create a web that can gather more and more sustenance and nutrients. Way before it begins to rise to the surface and meet the sun, it has created an unbelievably strong connection to the earth, the things that nourish it. So we could also think of it as being a deeper experience of the planet. It's a deeper experience. There's more internal exploration. There's more contemplation and meditation upon what that planet is about before it gets shared with the world at large. And so for her to have Jupiter retrograde, she's looking for meaning in life, and it's about what she's learned on the inside of herself, much more than what the wide world is dictating. You know, she really actually listens to the inner guide, the inner voice. Now, in the sign of Aquarius, that gives somebody a taste for a path of wisdom that makes unorthodox ideas work. And for her, that's unorthodox ideas work for her as a public persona. They're good at weaving worlds together. So Aquarius is called the water bearer, but it's actually an air sign. And the sign of Aquarius, I like to associate mostly with the shaman. So a shaman actually leaves the center of the village, leaves the city, whatever it is, it leaves the center of community, and it goes to the outskirts, it goes to the wilderness to talk to the gods, to the ancestors, to the spirits, whatever you want to call it. And so what they do is they actually bridge the world of regular people going through their drama and the world of the spirits. And they listen to the spirits and they share with humanity. And so that's why Aquarius is always associated with humanitarian ideals, great inventions. They're problem solvers. They really want to help. So to have Jupiter in Aquarius says that, you know, she's looking to actually help humanity. And she wants to artfully discover the invisible links that exist between what are often considered disparate worlds. So the distant past and the distant future. You could really look at her stuff as like futuristic vintage. You know, it's very Aquarian. Futuristic, yeah. And then like hard science and magic. These are two things that are supposed to be divided, two different things, but not to Jupiter and Aquarius people. They find how those two things weave together. She would also see the link between knowledge and wisdom. What's the difference and how do they actually meet and combine? So you can hear like that, how she weaves different time periods and genres of music together, like effortlessly. That's Jupiter in Aquarius. And so that's the kind of vehicle for her fame, the 10th house, you know. But obviously, once that vehicle got off the ground and she became famous, she uses that vulnerable and beautiful Venus, and she uses that sun opposed Neptune and that moon squared Pluto to bring it, you know. That's what really brings the stories that she has to tell.
I mean, this chart, the way that you've described it, all the planets, the houses, everything working together, I mean, it is so Lana, so Lana. And anybody who's a fan of Lana's music and of her, I mean, we all intuitively knew this, right? How she can combine all those things together. She can have that intense Plutonian energy, but still be able to overlay it with all that Venusian sugar, to be the archetype of the goddess, and to have that great, you know, Kennedy era sort of Camelot nationalism, not the like super scary like nationalism, but that sort of like gorgeous nationalism, again, kind of in that nice, beautiful, hazy Vaseline over the lens filter of that Neptune energy as well. And of course, Lana, she is kind of taking one for the team. She's expanding out using Jupiter in her 10th house. She kind of like thought about it, sat with it, became aware of it. This chart is of a person who's like super aware, super sensitive, and I think one of the reasons why so many of us relate to her versus a lot of other pop stars is there is that sense of a certain sort of spiritual intelligence, a sort of ability to think a little bit underneath the superficial layers and to be able to express it, and in a way that we all can relate. In terms of like the darkness, we can all be like, I feel it too, me too. All these dark urges. Maybe I can't express it to friends and family around me, and yet there's somebody who gets me. I don't feel as judged. So is there any sort of last words you would like to say about this chart, Rachel?
I feel like we've said enough for now. There's always more. But I feel like we've talked enough. The most important things that I found resonated with what I love about her art. So, you know, I feel like that is enough. But I did want to say happy birthday, Lana Del Rey, because it is her birthday, which is why we so happy birthday, Lana Del Rey. And also happy birthday to Lee McCluskey, my other friend with the same exact birthday as she. So
happy birthday to both. And happy birthday to any other solstice babies, people who are Geminis, and happy late birthday to Kanye as well. And guys, I think that if you would like to learn a little bit more about how to read your natal charts, I mean, it's great to read books and to also read your own natal chart before you have other people read it is pretty helpful as well. It's good to compare. But if you'd like to learn more, I mean, Rachel's class, Discovery, was amazing. And I took it. It was 12 weeks. I learned a whole, I don't know, like I started from nothing, and then I learned so much at the end, to the point where I can actually talk to Rachel right now, somewhat intelligently, about Lana's chart. Okay. So are there any sort of books or resources that you would recommend for people who are just starting out and want to learn a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote an ebook for free. It's a free ebook that I'm willing to give everybody who is interested, called Heartbeat, Unlocking the Mysteries of Your Natal Chart. It's a fairly comprehensive ebook that introduces you to how to read your own natal chart. Because I, like Chaweon, actually believe that it's really, really good to read your own chart, as well as talk to professionals. It's an ongoing dialogue you want to have. But as far as authors that I really recommend to beginners, I really, really like Stephen Forrest's The Inner Sky. You know, that is a really good place to start. He is an accessible writer. He lays it all out in a very logical and rather poetic way, but he does not talk down too much. So he actually addresses the reader with some respect, which I really like. So that's my favorite beginner book. If people want a slightly higher level of astrological reading after they've gotten down the basics, feel free to email me, aeolianheart@gmail.com, and I will be glad to give you recommendations based on where you're at. So, yeah.
Great. Well, guys, thank you so much for your comments. Loved reading everybody's reactions and questions. And thank you so much, Rachel, for this really amazing analysis of our goddess Lana Del Rey's chart.
My pleasure. Yeah, I was so pleased and really honored to be able to have this conversation with you all. And thank you for coming. I'm really overwhelmed and overjoyed that all of you love her as much as I do. So yeah, have a beautiful day, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.